There is a moment when power is decided, not in violence, not in argument, but in a pause. A question is thrown at you, an accusation, a demand for clarity, and you feel the impulse to explain, to justify, to defend. That impulse is where authority dies. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Power is not lost through cruelty. It is lost through exposure. To explain yourself is to kneel before the judgment of others. The ruler who explains has already accepted a lower position. Listen carefully. This is not about arrogance. This is about structure, hierarchy, control. Now understand the laws. 1. Explanation places you on trial. The moment you explain yourself, the frame shifts, quietly, but decisively. You are no longer standing above the situation. You are standing inside it. Explanation is not neutral. It is a posture, and it is a submissive one. When you explain, you accept an assumption that should never be granted, that others have the right to question you. This is how authority collapses, not through rebellion, but through consent. The accused explains. The ruler decides. Once you begin to justify your actions, you have already accepted that your position requires approval. And the moment approval becomes relevant, power is no longer yours alone. Power never explains. Power declares. A declaration ends movement. An explanation invites motion. When a king explains his actions, he opens the floor. He invites opinions. He creates space for disagreement. Debate does not refine authority. It dissolves it. Debate implies equality. Equality destroys hierarchy. Hierarchy is the skeleton of power. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. A prince who feels compelled to explain his decisions to his subjects has already descended into weakness. He is no longer ruling, he is persuading. And persuasion is what you do when force, position, or legitimacy is uncertain. Those beneath you are not entitled to your reasoning. They are not stakeholders in your internal calculus. They are observers of outcomes. This is difficult for modern men to accept because they have been trained to confuse leadership with transparency. They are told that clarity builds trust, that openness earns respect. This is false in matters of power. Transparency is for systems. Authority is for men. When you expose your reasoning, you reduce your stature. You shrink yourself to their level so they can inspect you comfortably. And once they feel comfortable inspecting you, they feel comfortable challenging you. Explanation teaches people something dangerous, that your actions are negotiable. Every explanation carries an unspoken message. If you disagree, I will listen. This is poison. The ruler does not ask to be understood. He expects to be followed. History does not remember leaders for how well they explain themselves. It remembers them for decisiveness, outcomes, and control. No empire was built on justifications. They were built on orders. Explanation is permission for others to judge you, and judgment is the weapon of the powerless. Those without authority judge. Those with authority act. When you explain, you hand your power upward. You elevate the listener into the position of evaluator. You place yourself below their gaze. Now they are no longer reacting to you. You are reacting to them. This reversal is subtle, but devastating. Once people believe they can question your decisions, they will escalate. First, they ask, why? Then they suggest alternatives. Then they resist. And resistance does not begin with rebellion. It begins with conversation. This is why silence is feared. Silence does not invite dialogue. It ends it. A calm refusal to explain communicates something primal. I do not require your agreement. That message creates psychological pressure. People instinctively submit to structures that do not bend. They may dislike it. They may resent it. But they will respect it. Machiavelli warned against being loved at the cost of authority. The ruler who explains seeks to be liked. The ruler who declares seeks to be obeyed. One survives criticism. The other survives power struggles. When you explain, you reveal insecurity even if your logic is perfect. Confidence does not need defense. Strength does not plead. The lion does not justify why it hunts. It hunts. So understand this clearly. Explanation is not communication. It is concession. It concedes that your position is fragile, that your choice can be overturned by opinion, that your authority exists only if others agree. This is why the most powerful figures say the least. Their silence is not emptiness. It is structure. They let results speak because results cannot be debated. And in the end, power is not maintained by being understood. It is maintained by being unquestioned. The man who explains stands in the dock. The man who declares stands on the throne. 2. Authority thrives on asymmetry. Authority does not survive equality. It feeds on distance. The moment power becomes symmetrical, it stops being power and turns into negotiation. And negotiation is what happens when no one truly leads. Asymmetry is the invisible structure behind every hierarchy. One side knows, the other observes. One side decides, the other reacts. This imbalance is not cruelty. It is order. When you hold authority, your value is not only in what you do, but in what remains inaccessible to others. Information, intention, and reasoning are forms of leverage. When they are shared freely, leverage disappears. This is why explanation is so dangerous. It collapses asymmetry. The moment you explain yourself, you invite others into your internal world. You allow them to see how you think, how you weigh decisions, how you arrive at conclusions. What once made you distant now makes you familiar. And familiarity erodes authority faster than open defiance. Machiavelli warned against this exact mistake. A ruler who allows himself to be fully known ceases to be feared and eventually ceases to be respected. People do not submit to those they understand too well. They submit to those they cannot fully grasp. Distance creates gravity. Mystery creates weight. When people cannot predict you, they tread carefully. When they cannot read you, they hesitate. That hesitation is power. Asymmetry means you see more than they do. You hear more than they hear. You decide before they even realize a decision was made. The moment you explain, that advantage evaporates. You turn your private calculations into public property. Now, everyone believes they are qualified to evaluate your choices. This is not leadership. This is exposure. In modern life, men are taught that transparency builds trust. In reality, transparency builds familiarity, and familiarity breeds entitlement. Once people feel entitled, they feel equal. Once they feel equal, they feel justified in resisting you. Authority cannot survive this environment. A leader is not a narrator of his thoughts. He is the source of outcomes. When subordinates know too much, they stop focusing on execution and start focusing on interpretation. They analyze motives, they question timing, they second-guess intent. Energy that should move forward turns inward. This is how organizations weaken. This is how men lose command of rooms, relationships, and reputations. Asymmetry also protects you from emotional exposure. When you explain yourself, you reveal values, attachments, and priorities. Once these are known, they can be exploited. People do not attack what they do not understand. They attack what they can map. Silence prevents mapping. Machiavelli understood that power requires selective opacity. You must be visible in action, but opaque in intention. Seen but not known. Present but not penetrable. This is not deception. It is preservation. The more powerful you become, the less accessible your inner world should be. Access is privilege. Privilege must be earned, not demanded. When you explain yourself to everyone, you give privilege to those who have not proven loyalty or competence. This weakens structure. Asymmetry maintains respect because it reinforces roles. Each person understands their position by what they are not given. Limits clarify hierarchy. The ruler who explains forgets this. He tries to be understood instead of obeyed. He trades distance for comfort, and comfort is the enemy of authority. People may say they want clarity, but what they respond to is structure. They follow those who stand apart, not those who stand beside them. This is why the most commanding figures speak less as they rise. Their silence is not emptiness. It is elevation. They do not close the distance. They increase it. Authority thrives when asymmetry is protected, when decisions come without explanation, when outcomes arrive without debate. The man who preserves distance commands respect without asking for it. The man who collapses, it must negotiate for every inch of ground. Power is not shared. It is positioned. 3. Clarity serves others, not you. Clarity is not a virtue in the realm of power. It is a concession. People demand clarity because uncertainty unsettles them. They want to know where they stand, what you think, and what comes next, so they can adjust themselves comfortably. This demand is not about fairness or efficiency. It is about reducing tension. Power, however, is not designed to reduce tension. It is designed to control it. The moment you make everything clear, you make yourself predictable. Predictability is safety for others and limitation for you. Once people can forecast your moves, they begin to plan around you instead of beneath you. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. A ruler who reveals his intentions gives his rivals time to prepare. A ruler who remains partially concealed forces others to react in uncertainty. Uncertainty creates caution. Caution slows aggression, and hesitation preserves dominance. When you explain your logic, your values, and your goals, you give others a map. They now know what you prioritize, what you avoid, and what pressures will move you. With that map, they no longer fear you, they calculate you. Calculation replaces respect. Clarity benefits the listener because it removes ambiguity. But ambiguity is leverage. The man who controls ambiguity controls the interaction. This is why powerful figures often speak in outcomes, not reasons. They announce what will happen, not why it must happen. The why invites evaluation. The outcome demands adjustment. Modern culture confuses clarity with honesty and honesty with strength. In reality, strength lies in selective disclosure. You reveal only what reinforces your position and withhold what could be used against you. Clarity exposes internal alignment. Once exposed, it can be challenged. People do not fight outcomes, they fight reasoning. If you say, "This is my decision," resistance is limited. If you say, "This is my decision because," resistance multiplies. Every explanation creates a new point of attack. Machiavelli warned that men judge more by appearances than by reality. This means you are not rewarded for internal coherence. You are judged by external command. The ruler who seeks to be understood prioritizes intellectual validation. The ruler who seeks to be obeyed prioritizes psychological control. Clarity also invites entitlement. Once people believe they fully understand your position, they believe they are qualified to revise it. They move from acceptance to participation. Participation erodes authority. Ambiguity, on the other hand, forces restraint. People hesitate to challenge what they cannot fully grasp. They wait, they watch, they comply. This hesitation is not confusion, it is discipline. When you remain partially unreadable, you occupy a higher psychological ground. Others must work to interpret you, while you remain still. They spend energy. You conserve it. Machiavelli valued this imbalance. Energy should flow upward toward power, not downward toward explanation. Clarity makes you available. Availability makes you negotiable. Negotiability weakens command. Power does not exist to be transparent. It exists to be effective. The man who explains everything becomes a manager of opinions. The man who withholds clarity becomes a point of reference. In the end, people do not follow those who make sense. They follow those who set direction. Clarity satisfies curiosity. Ambiguity commands respect. And in the arena of power, respect outlives understanding. 4. Justification signals. Weak positioning. Justification is not an explanation of strength. It is an admission of insecurity. The moment you justify your actions, you reveal something critical, that your position is not solid enough to stand on its own. Strong positions do not need reinforcement. They are reinforced by reality. Justification appears when authority feels threatened. It is the reflex of someone who senses resistance and tries to neutralize it with words. But words do not stabilize power. They expose its cracks. Machiavelli understood that power is a posture long before it is an argument. A ruler who justifies himself reveals that he is reacting rather than commanding. Reaction places you beneath the pressure instead of above it. This reversal is subtle but destructive. When you justify, you shift focus away from outcome and toward opinion. You begin addressing doubts instead of enforcing direction. You allow external perception to influence internal certainty. This is how control erodes. Justification communicates that approval matters, that consensus is necessary, that your decision requires validation to be legitimate. Power does not work this way. Legitimacy comes from position and enforcement, not from persuasion. The moment persuasion enters, hierarchy weakens. Those who justify invite scrutiny. Scrutiny invites disagreement. Disagreement invites resistance. A man who constantly explains why he is right teaches others that his authority is conditional. Conditional authority is temporary authority. Machiavelli warned against appearing weak, even when circumstances are difficult. Weakness does not need to be real to be fatal. It only needs to be perceived. Justification feeds perception of weakness. People do not analyze your reasons deeply. They analyze your behavior. If you sound defensive, they sense vulnerability. If you sound certain, they adapt. This is why power favors decisiveness over eloquence. The clear action intimidates more than the perfect argument. Justification also reveals fear of misunderstanding, fear of backlash, fear of loss. Once fear is visible, pressure increases. People test what looks unstable. The more you justify, the more questions you receive. The more questions you receive, the more you feel compelled to answer. This creates a cycle of diminishing authority. Soon, you are no longer leading. You are managing reactions. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear firm even when uncertain internally, not because deception is noble, but because exposure is dangerous. Power is preserved by posture. When you justify, you abandon posture for reassurance. You lower yourself into explanation to reduce discomfort, yours or theirs. But comfort is irrelevant to authority. The man who holds power must tolerate being misunderstood. He must tolerate being criticized. He must tolerate silence. Justification is the refusal to tolerate discomfort. And that refusal is weakness. A decision enforced calmly needs no defense. A position backed by authority does not require argument. When you justify, you communicate that your power depends on agreement. When you act, you communicate that agreement is optional. This distinction determines who controls the interaction. Power does not convince. It moves. Justification slows movement. Decisive action ends conversation. The ruler who justifies is already negotiating. The ruler who stands firm sets the terms. And in the realm of power, the man who sets the terms never explains why. 5. Explanations reveal leverage points. Every explanation is a disclosure, and every disclosure is a risk. When you explain yourself, you are not merely sharing information. You are exposing structure, how you think, what you value, and where your limits are. Power depends on concealment of these things. Machiavelli understood that a ruler must be visible in action, but hidden in motive. Once motives are known, they can be manipulated. Once priorities are exposed, they can be targeted. This is why explanation is dangerous. When you explain why you made a decision, you reveal what moved you to act. Was it fear? Was it loyalty? Was it morality? Was it pressure? Each answer becomes a lever. People do not need to overpower you physically to control you. They only need to understand what pulls you. The man who explains gives others a manual. They learn which arguments work, which emotions trigger response, which values override others. Once they know this, they no longer respect you, they manage you. This is the silent shift Machiavelli warned against. The ruler becomes reactive, not because he is weak, but because he has become readable. Readability is vulnerability. Those who can predict your reactions can engineer situations to exploit them. They apply pressure at the exact points you have exposed. They appeal to the values you have admitted. They threaten the outcomes you have declared important. None of this is possible without explanation. Silence denies them data. When you refuse to explain, you force others to guess. Guessing drains energy. Guessing creates uncertainty. Uncertainty causes hesitation. Hesitation protects power. Machiavelli believed that confusion among rivals was an advantage. A confused opponent wastes time. A confused subordinate hesitates to resist. Explanations eliminate confusion for them, not for you. And once confusion is gone, opposition becomes organized. Explanation also reveals emotional attachment. If you justify yourself passionately, people see where you are invested. If you defend a value repeatedly, they see what you fear losing. Fear is leverage. Those who wish to influence you will move directly toward whatever you defended most strongly. They will challenge it. They will threaten it. They will use it to extract concessions. This is not theory. This is human behavior. Machiavelli did not warn against honesty. He warned against exposure. A ruler may have values, but he must never allow them to become predictable liabilities. When you explain, you convert internal reasoning into external pressure points. You make private calculations public. Public calculations are no longer yours. Silence preserves ambiguity. Ambiguity preserves freedom of movement. The man who says less can change course without appearing inconsistent. The man who explains is trapped by his own words. Once you justify a decision, You must defend it again and again. You become bound to the reasoning you revealed. Others will hold you to it, even when circumstances change. This is how power becomes rigid and brittle. Machiavelli valued adaptability above moral consistency. Adaptability requires concealment. If no one knows why you acted before, no one can accuse you of betrayal when you act differently later. Explanations close doors. Silence keeps them open. The most powerful figures are frustrating to deal with because they never fully reveal themselves. They offer outcomes, not explanations. Movement, not motive. This frustration is strategic. People cannot grab what they cannot see. They cannot pressure what they cannot locate. The man who explains gives away his pressure points voluntarily. The man who remains silent forces others to operate in the dark. And in the dark, power always belongs to the one who stands still. 6. Silence trains obedience. Obedience is not created through force alone. It is created through expectation. What people expect from you determines how they behave around you, and what they expect is shaped by what you consistently provide. When you explain your decisions, you teach people a habit. You condition them to believe that every action must come with reasoning, that every move is open to discussion, that every outcome deserves commentary. This is not communication. This is training. Machiavelli understood that power is sustained through patterns, not moments. One explanation is not the danger. The pattern of explanation is. Once people are trained to expect explanations, silence feels like an offense. They begin to demand clarity as if it were a right. And the moment they feel entitled to clarity, they feel entitled to question authority. This is how obedience dissolves quietly. Silence, when used consistently, creates a different conditioning. It teaches people that outcomes arrive without justification, that decisions are not performances, that authority does not negotiate. At first, silence unsettles. People fill the gap with anxiety. They wonder what they missed. They wonder what they should do. Then something important happens. They adjust. Machiavelli knew that humans adapt quickly to power structures. They complain briefly, then comply. They do not rebel against silence. They reorganize themselves around it. Silence removes the illusion of participation. There is nothing to debate, nothing to push against, nothing to reinterpret. Only action remains. This trains obedience at a psychological level. When you explain, people focus on your reasoning. When you stay silent, people focus on their response. This shift is everything. A silent authority forces others to manage themselves. They anticipate. They self-correct. They fall into line without being told. This is the highest form of control. Machiavelli understood that the best ruler is not the one who constantly intervenes, but the one whose presence alone shapes behavior. Silence amplifie présence. Words soften authority because they invite engagement. Silence hardens it because it ends interaction. Over time, people stop asking, not because they understand you, but because they understand the structure. They learn that questions do not change outcomes. They learn that explanations are not forthcoming. They learn that adaptation is their responsibility. This is obedience. When a leader explains everything, he becomes a reference point for thought. People wait for guidance. They wait for permission. They wait for reassurance. When a leader stays silent, he becomes a reference point for action. People move without prompting. Machiavelli valued rulers who could maintain order without constant instruction. Order that depends on explanation is fragile. Order that survives silence is strong. Silence also prevents emotional escalation. Explanations invite argument. Arguments invitent défiance. Defiance invites force. Silence bypasses this entire chain. There is nothing to argue with, nothing to contradict, nothing to twist, just reality. When silence becomes your norm, obedience becomes automatic. People stop testing boundaries because tests yield no response. They stop pushing because pressure meets stillness. Stillness exhausts resistance. This is why the calm, silent authority is the most feared. Not because he is cruel, but because he is immovable. Machiavelli understood that people obey structures that do not react emotionally. Emotion signals vulnerability. Silence signals control. The man who explains teaches dependence. The man who stays silent teaches discipline. And discipline, once internalized, no longer requires enforcement. That is real power. 7. The powerful are accountable only to results. Power does not answer to questions. It answers to outcomes. This is the final distinction most men never understand. They believe authority must constantly justify itself. That decision requires explanation. That leadership must be accountable to opinion. Machiavelli rejected this completely. In the world of power, accountability does not flow downward to voices. It flows upward to reality. History does not interrogate motives. It records results. A ruler is not judged by how reasonable he sounded, but by whether his rule endured, not by how fair his explanations were, but by whether order was maintained. This is why explanation is irrelevant at the highest level. When you explain yourself, you are answering to perception. When you act decisively, you answer only to consequence. Power exists in the domain of consequences. Machiavelli understood that men forgive cruelty faster than failure. They excuse harshness if it produces stability. They tolerate severity if it creates security, but they never forgive weakness. Explanation is often an attempt to soften perception, to appear reasonable, to appear fair. But power is not concerned with appearing fair. It is concerned with functioning. A ruler who focuses on explanation prioritizes reputation over reality. A ruler who focuses on results prioritizes survival. This difference determines longevity. When you justify your actions, you tie your authority to interpretation. Interpretation changes with mood, culture, and emotion. It is unstable. Results are stable. An outcome either stands or collapses. It cannot be debated. Machiavelli advised rulers to be judged by what they achieve, not by what they promise or explain. Promises are words. Explanations are words. Power lives beyond words. This is why the most powerful men rarely explain themselves. They let events speak in their place. Their silence forces others to confront reality instead of arguments. If the outcome works, opposition weakens. If the outcome holds, criticism fades. If the outcome endures, authority solidifies. No explanation can compete with effectiveness. Those who demand explanations often do so because they lack influence over outcomes. They compensate with opinion. Opinion is noise. Results are signal. Machiavelli knew that people are impressed by force, order, and success even when they claim otherwise. Public morality is loud. Private admiration is quiet. Men say they value transparency. They submit to strength. This is why explaining yourself to critics is a strategic mistake. Critics do not want clarity. They want leverage. By explaining, you elevate their voice above your results. Power does the opposite. It lets results drown out voices. Accountability to results also grants freedom of movement. When you are accountable only to outcomes, you can adapt without apology. You can change course without defending past reasoning. The man who explained yesterday is trapped by his own logic today. The man who acted yesterday is free to act again tomorrow. Machiavelli prized flexibility above consistency. Consistency is for ideology. Flexibility is for rule. Explanation freezes you in time. Results allow evolution. This is why the powerful man tolerates misunderstanding. He knows that clarity is temporary, but outcomes endure. He accepts that some will hate him. He accepts that some will misjudge him. He accepts that silence will be interpreted negatively. He does not care, because power does not require universal approval. It requires effectiveness. The ruler who chases approval explains himself endlessly. The ruler who chases results moves forward relentlessly. In the end, only one survives. Power is not accountable to emotion. It is accountable to order. Not to comfort, but to control. Not to explanation, but to outcome. And this is the final law. The powerful man does not ask to be understood. He allows himself to be judged only by what remains standing after he acts. Power is not lost in confrontation. It is lost in concession. Every explanation is a small surrender. A surrender of distance. A surrender of authority. A surrender of position. Machiavelli understood that the need to explain is not born from strength, but from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of misunderstanding, fear of resistance. And fear has no place on the throne. The powerful man does not rush to clarify himself. He allows confusion to exist. He allows discomfort to grow. Because within that discomfort, hierarchy is reinforced. Silence is not emptiness. It is pressure. When you explain, you lower yourself into the arena of opinion. When you remain silent, you force others to look up. Power does not compete in conversations. It sets outcomes. Let them question. Let them misunderstand. Let them speculate. You are not here to be interpreted. You are here to decide. The ruler who explains teaches others to challenge him. The ruler who stands firm teaches others to adapt. History does not remember the reasonable. It remembers the effective. So say less. Hold position. Let results speak. Because the final truth is this: the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment authority begins.